This keeps getting crazier for the Chicago Bulls as an anonymous source has come out and thrown dirt on Zach LaVine. We're going to be talking about what this anonymous source had to say about Zach LaVine and his ability to help the team win. We're also going to be talking about what this means for the Chicago Bulls and what this means for their youth movement. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and this is another episode of Bulls Digest. Before we jump into it, wanted to let you know that 75.9% of you that watch the videos are not subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you mash that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with the latest news and happenings around your Chicago Bulls. It would mean the world to us as we try to reach 5,000 subscribers before the NBA season starts. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the topic of the day. We're talking about the article that was posted on ESPN.com, and it's talking about why the Chicago Bulls had to make a pivot with their roster, but mainly it talks about the situation that is going on with Zach LaVine and the current tension that is happening between the front office and Zach LaVine. And so let's start off with the first point of the article, and it's going back to where Zach LaVine went ahead and got the surgery for a broken bone in his foot. And it talks about how, well, AK was irked because he didn't feel like Zach LaVine was committed to the team. And he's also irked about the fact that they, I guess, feel like this surgery was not needed. All right. And so starting there, I think that this is a bit ridiculous for AK, especially when you look at the fact that AK had been shopping Zach LaVine, not that just that summer or last year, but the summer before. All right. So he had already been trying to trade him. So talking about commitment, he's come out this summer and he's talked about the fact that they were committed to DeRozan and his group and all this and all that, right? Well, he's sitting up here saying that, but he literally was trying to trade Zach LaVine going into next season. And so how committed was AK to this group if you were already looking to move on from Zach LaVine? All right, and so that's number one. So that whole commitment thing, I think, is a bit ridiculous. Number two, AK irked because Zach LaVine went ahead and got the surgery. All right, so Zach LaVine was trying to go ahead and he's trying to get himself in a good situation so he can play basketball in general, wherever he's at. So regardless if it's with the Chicago Bulls or if it was going to be with the Detroit Pistons out there, it doesn't matter. All right. He had to get the surgery in order for his foot to be in a good position to play basketball and be effective at it. So I don't have a problem with him getting the surgery, especially when he's looking at the long haul of his career. All right. And so I'm not buying the fact that he went out there and he was blocking a trade. And in fact, another thing that this article had to say is that, look, this was not a full-on trade request. You see it right there. All right. So it wasn't a full trade request that Zach LaVine had put out there with the organization. And in fact, what it looks like is that Zach LaVine and the front office were really working as partners to try to find the best case scenario for Zach LaVine and the best case scenario for the Chicago Bulls. And so, for them to leak out there that it was Zach LaVine's fault why he didn't get moved and that AK was irked, I think that that's a bit ridiculous. And I think that that's one of the reasons why you see that the Chicago Bulls are in the situation that they're in. And once again, they're not taking ownership of what has happened in this situation. Another thing they talk about is the things that are going on with Billy Donovan and Zach LaVine. They talk about the relationship being strained a bit, especially when they're talking about film studies where I guess Zach LaVine was called out. And most notably, they talk about a 2022 game against the Orlando Magic where the Chicago Bulls were coming back. We fell short in this particular game, but Zach LaVine was upset that he was not on the floor at the end of the game and said that, look, I felt like a player of my caliber should have been out there to help this team get the win. All right. And so that was it. All right. Now, it does talk about that Billy Donovan has come out and visited Zach LaVine in LA. It talks about the training staff coming out to see Zach LaVine. So they're trying to make sure that he's in a good place. And they're also, too, trying to keep the relationship good publicly as well. But it looks like that Zach LaVine has really taking it personal because he's felt like he's been blamed for a lot of the losses that the Chicago Bulls have taken, which I think that that's ridiculous. I think that when you look at it, 76 of his 110 teammates that he's played with are no longer in the NBA. That doesn't have anything to do with Zach LaVine. That has everything to do with the Chicago Bulls and how they constructed the team. Zach LaVine has no say or no control over who signs or whatever with the Chicago Bulls. That's all the organization and the front office. Next, I get that Zach LaVine is paid like a star player, and we wanted him to be the franchise player, but he hasn't been that. He's at best been the third or fourth best player on the team. And there's a lot of different reasons why. I get it. At times he gets into isolation ball. Next, sometimes he just gets lost out there defensively, and he doesn't quite have that it factor. I totally get that, and that comes with being a star in professional sports. Like if you're playing quarterback and you get paid the most amount of money, doesn't matter if the defense is terrible, doesn't matter if the offensive line is terrible or the wide receivers around you are bad, you're still the quarterback, you still get paid a lot of money, you're still the star, you're going to take the blame for that situation. And looking at Zach LaVine and his situation, that's what's going on here. He got paid to be a star, and he hasn't really turned out to be a star player for us. But the one thing that I will say is that Zach LaVine didn't sign himself. That was the Chicago Bulls that elected to sign Zach LaVine. So once again, the Chicago Bulls don't take ownership of this, and I think this is another reason why, you have to start to look at what is being said around Zach LaVine and this whole situation and really question what the Chicago Bulls have done moving to this point. Now, this brings us to the last point of the article and what this anonymous source had to say, and I think that this is really where the Chicago Bulls are as a franchise. I think that they're really split either way. I think that there's half that think that Zach LaVine should be there. I think that there's half the people that think that, Zach LaVine shouldn't be there. All right, and so this last quote comes from an anonymous team source. We don't know who said it, but it's pretty bad what was said. So here is what this source had to say. Shout out to CHGO Podcast. This is their graphic. Go check their podcast out. They had a lot to say about it. But it says, look, Zach's never won. He's done it his way the whole way and never won. If he's interested in winning, he'll do what's asked of him. And if he's motivated to not be here, one way is to come, be compliant, and be who he is, an anonymous Bulls team source. All right. And so that is pretty terrible. All right. They're saying that, look, Zach LaVine is not a winner. Even when he shows up to work and he's completely compliant, apparently he's in the way of winning there. And so I just don't understand why this team source would come out, first of all, and be anonymous. If you're going to say something like that, you should probably attach your name or go tell that person what you have to say. And number two, it just tells you how the Chicago Bulls hustle backwards, how it doesn't make logical sense what they do, and they've really hurt themselves in this situation because how could you trade Zach LaVine now when you have a team source to come out and say that? And it looks like the Chicago Bulls have not been on the same page for quite some time because you have reports saying, hey, we think he's healthy. We expect for him to help the young team and help him grow and all this stuff like that. When you see reports saying the exact opposite, that he'll be in the way, that it's going to be tension in the locker room and this and that, and then you see this comment, it just lets you know that the Chicago Bulls are not on the same page. And I think that they're also taking zero accountability for the situation, which goes into what Kendrick Perkins just said a day ago. And I totally agree with this when he comes out and says, look, why do they continue to blame Zach LaVine? And what has Billy Donovan done? He's got an extension in all this. And why is it that there's no accountability with the front office and the organization, which is what I totally agree with. I think that, look, the Chicago Bulls, is as bad as this situation is, nobody's taking accountability for this. Nobody is saying that, well, hey, it's our fault. It always seems to be pointed to Zach LaVine, and it's always his fault. And then on top of that, it just looks looks terrible, okay? Because you want to trade him, and then you have a team source come out and say this just looks awful. So I'll leave it to you in the comments. What do you think? Is this more about the Chicago Bulls? Is this still all about Zach LaVine and it's his fault? What do you think this is going to do for the Chicago Bulls moving forward with LaVine, Vooch, and then also to Lonzo Ball being on the roster? Is this going to help or hurt our youth movement? Once again, even though we do not know what's going on with this nonsense, I'm still saying go Bulls, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.